emergency for the first time in about...
This is Jim, and
Receiving this message. We are Ken Jennings and John Roderick. We speak to you from our present, which we can only assume is your distant past, the turbulent time that was the early 21st century.
Fearing the great cataclysm that will surely befall our civilization, we began this monumental reference of strange and obscure human knowledge. These recordings represent our attempt to compile and preserve wonders and esoterica that would otherwise be lost.
So whether you're listening from an advanced civilization or have just reinvented the technology to decrypt our transmissions, this is our legacy to you.
This is our time capsule. This is the Omnibus. You have accessed entry 104.GE3008, certificate number 30747. The Battle of the Sisters.
Have the envelope. Olivia de Havilland.
Your award for To Each His Own, I took as an incentive to venture forward. Thank you for this very generous assurance that I have not entirely failed to do so.
We already covered award ceremonies a few weeks ago with the EGOT.
Yes, we did.
But it's Oscar week this week as we place this entry into the vault.
And just as I love porn,
record.
you love mainstream award shows that are only watched by 80-year-olds.
Network TV awards shows are kind of my porn. Well, let me ask you this. I don't know if we've ever talked about this. What's your relationship to like celebrity gossip? Like, are you interested when you see a People magazine in the checkout line? Do you have any idea what they're talking about? Do you ever hear a celebrity rumor that titillates you at all?
Not really.
You didn't grow up in that kind of ecosystem?
No, I didn't. I mean, I'm interested in J-Lo and Ben Affleck's marriage.
Okay, so that's like good entry level, celeb gossip.
Ups and downs.
But it's got to be a 20-year story for you to glom onto it.
Yeah, because I love J-Lo. I've always been sort of on the fence about Ben Affleck, but I also feel like all those pictures of him looking sad or kind of grouchy sad, I'm like, what's going on with Ben Affleck? Like, what's happening in his heart? I also, speaking of people with J, I love Jennifer Lawrence, which is
that was quite a connection you made between J-Lo and Jennifer Lawrence because they have the letter J in their name.
Is it not?
I guess she's J-Law.
She's J-Law.
Yeah, she's J-Law.
And so, but the thing about J-Law is she stays out of the gossip columns, as far as I can tell. She's just sassy. She's just sassy. I like her. I like her sass.
She's funny on a talk show.
Yeah. If there was something about Amy Adams, I guess I would probably read it. But she also stays out of the
Basically,
trades.
we're just hearing about kind of middle-aged actresses you like. You think are cute.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Who else?
I mean, that is what powers a lot of celebrity gossip.
Yeah, but if I look at People magazine now, I have no idea who any of those people are. I'm like, are these soap opera stars? Are they pop stars?
We know from the name of the magazine they are people.
They are people.
That's the one thing we know about them. But they could be super famous. Like you could just be like, tell me who any of the Jonas Brothers are or have been married to. You have no idea, right?
No, I know. I mean, I know what the Jonas Brothers look like. There's the one super cute one. There's the one sort of cute one. And there's the sort of gangly one who's not cute.
It's like a fairy tale. And, and the third gangly one that wasn't cute.
I did notice lately that the gangly one has done something with his hair. And he looks a lot better. He's a lot cuter as a... people grow into their looks.
I think you're way more into celebrity gossip than I imagined. You have takes on Jonas Brothers' hair.
Yeah. Oh, who are the other celebrities I'm familiar with? There's the Property Brothers.
We should have a show where you just name celebrities you know. You're like, Ben Kingsley? Is he a celebrity?
I've seen the loop of Leonardo DiCaprio like making a weird face when he's bumped into by Lady Gaga.
Okay.
But the weird face seems just like it might have just been a weird face and not, but it's shown as a kind of like, oh, Leonardo's like all grossed out by her.
It seems like this is coming to you maybe via social media algorithms. Like memes are now teaching you about celebs, whereas in my day the celebs taught us about memes.
No, I don't think that the memes. I think most of my memes are not talking about celebs at all. They tend to be like orca eating seals, or eating great white sharks.
I mean, the orcas are celebrities in their world.
They are.
We stand J-Pod and K-Pod.
Top of the food chain celebs.
We love a salmon-eating king.
No, I mean, who even are celebs, Ken? Like, why don't you tell me, like, are really the Jonas Brothers the closest thing you could come to celebs? They're like that. They're like, what, 15 years ago? 25? 6?
That is a problem. I don't think this was with you. I was with somebody else. Was it? No, maybe it wasn't Omnibus. You were trying to name it. Yeah, you were trying to name a heartthrob, and you said Zac Efron, and then we all agreed that was not the newest reference.
Right.
But really, neither of us had I mean, I guess the One Direction kids, Harry Styles, pop music will always continue to produce new heartthrobs. But Taylor Swift is 35.
Yeah, right. Who's the super unlikely redheaded soul singer from England?
Ed Sheeran?
Ed Sheeran.
Okay. But Ed Sheeran is also somebody that the moms like, not somebody that the teens like.
Oh, I see. Well, I did go to the Sabrina Carpenter show.
Okay, there we go.
And I was extremely impressed with her cuteness, but also her command of the arena.
Oh, she's really good in it.
Yeah, her show is killer, and she's super smart. And it made me realize, because I was driving in the truck the other day and I found the pop station, which is always called Queeb or Quab or Queeb.
Yeah, some good Scrabble word.
Yeah. And I just listened to pop radio, and I think for the first time in 20 years, every single song that came on, I thought, hey, this is a well-written, a well-performed song without a ton of dumb effects, without any kind of middle eight that's boring. I mean, I feel like there's been a turn in pop songwriting that even if it's being done by an algorithm, and it doesn't feel like it is, it feels like it's being done by songwriters. I think we're in a new era. I think pop songwriting, and almost all of it is female fronted.
Yes.
And the songs are just like, I don't know if they're quite Motown level of killer, but they're memorable, hooky, smart. And I'm kind of like really into top 40 music.
This is a real turn from a couple months ago when our listeners were roasting you because you seemed to think that Chappell Roan was black.
Yeah.
And now you've come around.
I got roasted.
You're a Swiftie now.
Well, my daughter has decided that she now has completely independent tastes. And she's like, this is my music and it is not your music. And I'm not one of those dads who's like, I'm going to shoulder my way into your culture and be an expert on it.
Hey, boy genius, what do you think?
But she is interested in playing me her songs. Like, come listen to this.
Yeah.
And I listened to it and
that's what cars are for.
Right. Except I've never figured out how to integrate my car with any kind of streaming service. So I just have terrestrial radio. And, up until recently, I've made her listen to, Sweet Emotion by Aerosmith enough times that she'll never have to hear it again. But now she's actually bringing me into her room and playing songs for me on her computer. And they're undeniable. So now when I go to listen to music, I'm like, well, why don't I listen to this? And I don't recognize any of the artists, but yeah, I'm convinced that this is the dawn of a new age of pop songwriting. You're
actually talking about the artistry and abilities of celebs, and that's pretty far removed from what people like to gossip about them, right? Like that's what they want to talk to Seth Meyers about. But really, everybody at home is just like, how's their marriage? Are they gay?
Well, so what in my era, it was Princess Stephanie of Monaco.
Right.
What was Mick Jagger up to?
Charles and Di.
Yep.
A lot of Charles and Di. Elizabeth Taylor.
Elizabeth Taylor.
Well into her her
50s.
seventh or eighth marriage, well into her 50s and 60s, she was still on the front of the Inquirer or Us or whatever, like every other week.
It's so funny that Elizabeth Taylor in her 50s used to look like a little old lady to me. And now that I'm in my 50s, Elizabeth Taylor has all those pictures of her in her 50s.
Yeah, she's what
I'm
you
like,
would...
wow, she's still, pretty cute.
She's what you would like to see at a PTA meeting.
Yeah, right. With her like tousled hair and her weird big shouldered outfits. I'm like,
All the diamonds.
yeah, why don't you stand up and yell at me for my parking?
But I feel like I was maybe I'm from the tail end of this era. Like, do millennials and up care about celebrity gossip? It always seemed to trend older. It trended female. It kind of targeted...
Right.
It kind of targeted moms, and
They surely do.
we still had, when I was a kid, we still had a few. We still had Rona Barrett and Army Archer. Like, there were name gossip columnists.
I do not know either of those people. Oh, those were writers.
Yeah, those were the people who would pop up on, the Hollywood Minute on CNN or Entertainment Tonight, or I think Army Archer wrote for Variety. He's not still alive, is he? It'd be funny if he was like 96 and still writing his column. Ben Kingsley has a new project.
I mean,
Army Archer died in 2009.
rock stars, do people care about their exploits anymore? I mean, when was it? Who even was the last? I mean, people talk about Taylor Swift all the time. Who she's dating, what she's doing, why her relationships break up.
And the same for hip hop. If hip hop is rock now, like
Which I think this new era of pop music is heralding the end of hip hop as pop.
a title change.
I think it is.
But there was a long era where hip hop beefs were way more interesting peek behind the curtain than you ever got into what was happening with the Rolling Stones.
But most of those were like straight hip hop artists, or at least publicly facingly straight, arguing with other hip hop artists in a different part of the country. They didn't tend to be like about who was caught on the beach in the Côte d'Azur.
There is some of that.
Is there?
Yeah, there's some of that.
Who's zooming who?
Are you following Drake and Kendrick? No.
But that's two dudes yelling at each other.
Yes.
Yeah.
But about I see.
It's not the old stuff, which is who's dating and
Right.
who's sad and.
But there is some who's sketchy in their private life.
Oh, I
You
see.
know, like
Well, I was assuming they were all sketchy in their private life. Isn't that part of the song?
That's part of the song.
I mean, it's like there's
and Rihanna singing about Jay-Z's affairs, that
Right.
it makes its way into the music.
yeah, Jay-Z and Beyonce were for
Did
sure.
I say Rihanna?
Yeah.
Oops.
Oops.
Beyonce singing about Jay-Z's affairs.
Yeah, there was a lot of that. Do you remember Jay-Z getting beaten up by Beyonce's sister in an elevator? Mm-hmm. That was some pretty good
That was
gossip.
good. That was good celebrity gossip.
But yeah, Beyonce turns it into art.
There was, I mean,
Her
this kind
husband.
of powered American entertainment for a long time. Less so music, although the Beatlemania kids wanted to know which of the Beatles might be dating, and did
All
George
of
Harrison
them.
really like Jelly Babies and
Secret,
we
all
did-
of them.
Yeah, we didn't know about their roadies in Hamburg or their secret marriages to
Right.
Cynthia at the time. But
He's taken ladies.
But the movies in particular, for decades, were kind of powered by this idea of a glamorous California life. That when you went to the movies, you were not just interested in the criminal shenanigans of the characters the actors were playing and whether their heist would go over. You're also thinking about, who is she? Which star is she really into? Is he actually? Is his marriage on the rocks? And the studios leaned into this because, it was a double-edged sword. You would have, they would be paying big money to keep Robert Mitchum's marijuana bust or Mary Astor's tawdry sexcapades out of the tabloids. But at the same time, they want coverage of who is going to the premiere with who, which closeted star can we imagine a new beard for? Who's Troy Donahue dating?
I still, when I read Wikipedia entries, which is 80% of my waking hours, and I end up on Hollywood stars of the 60s and 70s, and I read deeply enough and follow links to articles and imagine that era and those relationships, I still think of it as the best, even though they're all alcoholics.
Yeah, we all know the secret of what was actually going on.
Even though everybody was desperately sad, even though half of those guys died at 54.
All the pill addictions, all the closeted gay men.
Yeah. I still think of it as like where I would be if I had my choice.
It worked.
Yeah.
Like that was name gossip columnists like Hedda Hopper and Luella Parsons. They were household names.
Yeah.
Reporting live from premieres breathlessly with their mics and having daily columns in the Hearst and the non-Hearst papers respectively, and rivalries with each other. There was a whole industry designed to propping up that idea. Walter Winchell was basically a gossip columnist.
That's right.
He would just tell you who was at the Stork Club last night. And that was as interesting as the content. People would go to the movie 6 times a week. And on some level, they're like, I hope this Western is good. But really more of it is just like, how's Gary Cooper's marriage?
Yeah, that's right. What's going on with David Niven? I feel like David Niven is maybe the guy that I wanted to be the most. He was like a spy in World War II. He's
like a cat burglar.
He was like very upper middle class accent. He was a James Bond, but he was also, and he won an Academy Award, and he was in movies before the war. And then he was full on Guns of Navarone, Murder by Death, 70s. I just feel like.
And also telling amazing stories to Dinah Shore and Mike Douglas, right?
Right. But then didn't die like so many of his contemporaries, of alcoholism at the age of 50. But,
That's the dream.
Yeah, lived into the when did he die? Lived into the 80s. And of all the things, died in Switzerland.
Oh, the dream.
Oh, if I could just die in Switzerland.
It's a very attainable goal.
I don't want to die in Switzerland like on a trip to Switzerland.
That's what I was going to say.
No.
You just need a plane ticket and a bottle of pills. Is that too dark?
No. I don't want that. I want to be in Switzerland as a tax exile or there, I don't know, doing whatever, just sitting on my money.
Maybe working for years on an album that never comes out. That's a fun thing to do in Europe.
There you go. That's what it is. What happens if you Google Ken Jennings' wife? I mean, I know what happens when I Google John Roderick wife.
What does happen? You're not married.
The first picture is me with Angela Shen, who was my queen in the Seafair Festival.
Well, that's good.
But then...
don't encourage people to Google my wife. What are you doing?
Then there are several pictures of me just kind of standing with Amy Mann and other... Basically, me with any lady.
The algorithm decides that's adjacent to... Yeah, there's not a lot. I guess I'm now in a job where people are theoretically Googling, like, what's up with him? What's up with his kids?
Well, if you Google Ken Jennings, the first thing that pops up is Ken Jennings' wife.
Oh, it autocompletes.
And then the second thing is Ken Jennings' salary. So people are still gossiping.
They're more interested in my wife than my salary.
Yeah, well,
I mean, that's a real credit to her. I
mean,
think.
she's a nice lady.
And Google, she's a nice lady. And everybody, and if Google will get rid of other autocompletes, right? Like Ken Jennings' feet does not appear.
No, but if you then pick images on Ken Jennings' wife, it's just pictures of Ken Jennings.
Oh, good.
There's not a single picture of Mindy Jennings here. Whereas John, oh no, wait, oh no, you wouldn't want to see that one. That's not. But if you
Wow.
if you do John Roderick wife, it's me with ladies. The whole thing. So people are more interested in my.
The thing about
ladies.
being married is you're not with ladies.
Right.
I guess you're with one lady.
But I think also there are probably just so many pictures of you standing at a podium that they ruin all other
Well, yeah,
photos.
like in my job, I'm at work. I am not on a red carpet in my job. And I think there's probably, back when I was a Jeopardy contestant, there's probably some news profiles that had pictures of like me with Mindy and or one or two of the kids when they were babies.
There's one of me with Megan Jasper of Sub Pop. She's a plausible wife. She sort of looks like my
She's
wife.
a plausible wife. Are we hearing this now about you and Megan Jasper?
Rachel Flotard.
This is exciting.
Plausible.
Should we do the blind item of a recently resurgent Seattle indie rocker? And I don't know. Is Megan Jasper even straight?
Yes, for sure.
Is she married?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, never mind.
All of these people are, everyone is married. All people are married except me.
Everyone is married except me.
Here's what I suggest to our listeners. Don't bother Googling either of those things because it's just going to be boring and wrong.
Like there's lots of interesting people whose personal lives you could Google. Like when I look at a Wikipedia entry, I immediately go to personal life.
Oh, you do?
Yeah. I don't want to see somebody's filmography or find out what elementary school they went to. I'm going to be like,
what's your deal?
Yeah, let's find out like what they went to jail for, who their various marriages were, do their kids like them?
Well, so this is weird. At one point, I was reading these, Wikipedia pages of the golden age of gossip stars, and I just noticed how many of them were married 5 times. And I wondered why I hadn't been married 5 times, because some of these marriages only lasted 2 years. Some of them lasted 6 weeks.
Yeah, like Mickey Rooney's kicking your ass.
And when I thought about like my relationships over the years, well, I could have gotten married a lot of times. I was in love and they were in love and we could have gone and gotten married.
They were just in a culture where, of course, if you were in love with somebody for a week and a half, you would get married on a sailboat.
Yeah. If you wanted to sleep with somebody, you kind of had to get married. And
not in Hollywood.
I was, that's probably true. I was decrying this on a podcast. Why wasn't I married 5 times? I feel like my Wikipedia entry should have 5 wives. It would comport with my overall thing. And a listener said, well, I can put all 5 of the girlfriends that you've mentioned numerous times on your Wikipedia page. And there was an outcry from the fan community saying, don't do that.
Wiki vandalism.
Well, no, he was being sincere. He was like, I can help you fulfill this dream.
But it's a crime against Wikipedia, even if it's a favor to you.
Yeah. Well, and what I said when I finally heard about it was, this would not be a favor to any of those 5 people that none of them want to be so identified.
Yeah, exactly. 5 fictional characters, maybe.
Guess what? It was John Roderick's 3rd girlfriend that he didn't marry. Ken, I saw you posted on the addenda. No, I'm sorry, on the Patreon, a picture of a new T-shirt for Patreon subscribers.
Yeah, this was the new perk that we were going to rename that Washing Bear level every year with a new mascot and put out an exclusive shirt like we did with the Washing Bear shirt. And we were a few months late, but we now have the reintegrated baby elephant shirt available for those who have donated at that level.
I gotta say, it's the cutest shirt of all the omnibus merch we've ever made. The Esowit shirt is my faves.
He's like a little Disney circus Esowit guy.
So cute.
He's adorable.
And it says omnibus, just the best.
And we only have that amazing design thanks to our friends at meh.com. Our friend Dave has been helping us out with Patreon rewards.
You said meh.
M-E-H.
I would pronounce that meh.
What did I say?
Meh.
Meh.
It's not, you sound like a baby sheep. It's meh. Everybody knows what meh means. Nobody knows what meh means.
I didn't say meh. Meh. I'm not like a...
Meh.
Meh is a kind of a... Dave told me that if Omnibus were a store, it might be like meh. Because it's a deal of the day thing. There's one new thing every day to check out. And
that's cool.
Sometimes it's weird. Sometimes it's kind of vintagey from the past. It might be something you've never heard of.
It still sounds like Omnibus.
Something you didn't need to know.
How did he ever get the URL meh.com?
Isn't that great?
That seems like it should have cost $1 million.
Maybe you got to spend money to make money. But, with Omnibus, we do not sell the weird things you learn about every show. Whereas with Meh, you can buy their cool, weird new thing every day, and it's pretty cheap.
So here's for today, their thing of the day for $29.99 is a putting mat that's 9.5 feet long and branded with whatever your favorite college is.
Oh.
So you can get your North Carolina or Ohio State putting mat, and it's actually pretty rad looking, even though this is not a thing I would ever buy.
It does. I bet it's not usually that normie. Like maybe we picked a day when, like, we're really hoping we have a lot of golf nerds listening. But that's the thing about me. It'll be something totally different tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that.
Yeah. So you go every day, and then there's something like here up at the top. Today's side deal is a 2-pack of 360 electrical 4-port USB hub with braided cord and charging cables, 2 of them for $22.
If you like Omnibus but wish it was a box delivered to your front porch, go to meh.com. Did I say that right?
Meh.
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 Meh.com.
Meh.
Meh. The 1942 Oscars were the centerpiece of one of the most astounding bits of celebrity gossip in the history of America or the movies or anything else. And it's so improbable that even though it lasted into the 2020s, it is maybe a little bit memory hold today. I don't know if people really realize how strange and strained the relationship was between 2 of the biggest movie stars of the 40s, Olivia de Havilland and Joan Fontaine.
It was strained, you're saying, between them.
Yes.
Were they in competition to be the 4th wife of who?
Ali Khan,
Right.
Aristotle Onassis.
No?
They were in competition for everything, and it predates their Hollywood careers. By virtue of like starring in respectively Gone with the Wind and Rebecca, like 2 movies of the early of the 1940-ish era that are still kind of widely seen today and still have some cultural currency because of respectively slavery and Alfred Hitchcock.
2 things that we talk about all the time.
Like, it's really, what did the 20th century give us? Slavery and Alfred Hitchcock. I guess it didn't give us slavery.
No.
Jim Crow and Alfred Hitchcock. So like these 2 people are still maybe more remembered, or, you know, their movies are still watched.
Right.
And yet, I don't know how many people just who happen to know of Gone with the Wind or see Rebecca on TCM or whatever would know that the 2 biggest stars at the time were sisters. That's already a little bit weird. It's not unheard of in other eras. Warren Beatty and Shirley MacLaine were
Sisters?
Were sisters. Were among the biggest stars of their time, and they were siblings. We already mentioned the Jonas Brothers. There's probably big sibling stars today that I'm blanking on. Who are the biggest sibling stars today? Matt Damon and Ben Affleck.
Who were the twins?
Mary-Kate and Ashley
Mary
Olsen?
Kate and Ashley.
I guess.
I met them once.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, at the Chateau Marmont.
Were they nice?
Yeah, they were nice. I mean, they were sitting in a little couch conversation pit with like
You just plopped yourself down between them?
a bunch of hangers on. No, I ran into one of them on the way to the bathroom, and then when I came out,
Could you tell which one it was? Did you guess?
No. Although at that point in time, they were really distinguishing each other. One of them was wearing a lot of dark eyeliner. So then later, I was walking past their conversation pit, and I said, "Hey," and then she and her sister both said, "Hey." So I feel like I met
And then
them.
their bodyguard asked you to leave.
Yeah.
The story of Olivia and Joan de Havilland, as they grew up, actually starts in Japan. In 1893, a British lawyer, businessman, academic type, old money,
God, I always wish
aristocratic
people would call
type,
me that.
Walter de Havilland. You have to be named Walter de Havilland. Decamped for Japan. He moved to Tokyo with his wife, Lillian, and there became maybe the earliest otaku in British history. He just loved all things Japanese. He became the first...
I thought that was called a weeaboo.
Yeah, or weeaboo.
Oh, otaku is the Japanese word for it?
I actually don't know. Somebody needs to help. I think maybe weeaboo is more pejorative.
Oh, yeah, probably. And probably we can't say it anymore, and I just didn't get the memo.
You can't appropriate weeaboo.
Well, I sure can. I'm on the internet.
You don't have a waifu pillow, or do you?
No.
No,
No,
I do not.
No.
And like he became the first like white guy to get really into Go. Like he was not the best Go player, but he was like kind of master level at playing Go. And
who did he find to play with?
Dumber Japanese people. The Japanese loved this guy. He had rowed for Cambridge, and he made a big deal of that, kind of his preppier. We know that the Japanese will get really into prep.
That's right.
And this is an early 1890s symptom of that, apparently. He claimed this, kind of aristocratic, with the name of de Havilland, he could claim this kind of Norman aristocracy lineage.
Oh, yeah.
That played really well in Japan, and he was from a wealthy and successful family. His nephews, I'm going to blank on their names, Jeffrey and Herward. Actually, we may have discussed this on the Omnibus before, but I was probably nodding off because it was an aviation show. they became the de Havillands of the aviation company fame. The de Havilland Beaver, I guess, was the show.
Yeah, we did talk about the de Havilland Beaver.
Those were his nephews, or maybe half nephews. Lillian, his
Not
wife,
compatible with Marxism.
the de Havilland Beaver.
No, all of the de Havillands. It sounds like they're just a bunch of richies.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Having Norman blood. You should be impaled on a pike by the serfs.
Go back to France.
Exactly. His wife Lillian was a thwarted actress, from a young age, which will come into our story. But while living there, they gave birth to 2 daughters. Olivia was born in 1916 in Tokyo, and a younger sister named Joan was born the following year, just 15 months later. Does that count as Irish twins?
It does.
I don't know what the cutoff is.
It does. I don't know if we can say that anymore, though.
You can't? Is it?
I mean, I can. You can. You just did.
I'm slightly Irish.
What part of you is Irish?
I have a great-grandmother who is Irish.
You should go into an Irish pub and make sure everybody in there knows.
Great-grandmother Flynn. Yeah, I'll tell them all.
Yeah.
And even though they were you'd think maybe, I don't know, you'd think a year apart would maybe create a bond?
It really depends, I think, between
it can cut
siblings.
both ways.
Yeah, whether or not you decide that you are making common cause or whether you're competing for breast milk.
Our kids were 4 years apart, and we thought that was enough that they would never be competing for the same kind of parental love or care or resources. Yeah, not great. It turns out kids can be 4 years apart and still totally have slap fights in the car for 20 years.
I only have the one daughter, and even so, I feel sorry for the younger sibling that we didn't have, because my daughter would have absolutely manhandled them.
Doted on that kid.
Or all kind. That kid would have had to really assert itself in the world.
I think she would have loved to have a little baby.
Oh, absolutely loved.
But not in a way that the baby would always enjoy.
Yeah, she would have dragged it around by its neck.
The arrival of Joan seems to have changed the makeup of this Anglo-Tokyo household a fair bit. The problem is, in all these stories, we're reading the actress's subsequent middle-aged autobiographies.
Of course.
So we can see the two sides of the battle. In Olivia's telling, the new child was always sickly. Everybody agrees that Joan was not always in good health, and she was this kind of the sickly one that everyone worried about, while Olivia was hale and hearty. And as a result, Olivia felt that Joan was always her parents' little princess,
right?
And got all this preferential treatment, and when Joan got chicken pox, everything in the house had to shut down, and it was a national crisis, whereas Olivia was just sent to bed and told not to scratch.
Yeah.
Whereas in Joan Fontaine's telling, Olivia was just, even at 1 year old, was appalled to be kicked out of the position of princess of the nursery and never recovered from having to share the spotlight. And
both things can be true.
They can both be true. I think what we have in this case is two people being kind of raised by a failed diva who tend to grow into, it's probably gendered to say diva, so I apologize, but
she wanted to be an actress.
They grow into those spotlight grabbing tendencies naturally on both.
It was an era
ends.
Where fathers were less involved in the early raising of children, and probably everyone was an alcoholic.
That's entirely true. And the dad gets less involved soon. He begins having an affair with a Japanese woman. I don't know if she's a household staff member, but I think Yoki-san is her name. This ends the marriage pretty quickly. Lillian flees with the kids to California.
Are both kids born in Tokyo?
Yes.
Oh.
Which is another, already a funny part of the story. Two of the greatest actresses of the 40s, Tokyo born. Their mom had always made sure, they grew up in San Jose, I think, after moving. Lillian quickly remarried a department store manager named George Fontaine. And by all accounts, he was an unusually involved father, and not in a good way, though.
Oh.
They called him the Iron Duke around the house because he ran a military household, literally to the kids having like khaki-colored beds that had to have hospital corners.
Whoa.
And I think the kind of thing where like they school started to notice that they were showing up with bruises on their shins from dad's disciplinary canings. Yeah, he was a shin whacker.
Let them never call me the Iron Duke.
Lots of things.
Of all the things.
Yeah.
Call me any manner of things.
You're going to get canceled again for being the Iron Duke.
The Iron Duke. No.
Yeah, that's not... I mean, if you're an actual Duke or Kaiser of some kind, maybe it's good to be called the Iron Duke.
Right. I mean,
as a parent,
I did want to be like the Bismarck of indie rock, but not as a dad.
And even as a department store manager, maybe one should not be called the Iron Duke.
No, I just pet her hair and tell her that she's good.
It may be even worse than that. Like in Joan's book, she says that not only was he physically abusive, like he was also maybe a little too attentive at bath time. So new dad is a creep, basically. And there's a whole, as a result, their childhood, this could be a case where the sisters find common ground. But in fact, the rivalry seems to continue with the move to America. There's an incident poolside at some point. In one of the kids' books, they're 6, and in the other kid's book, they're 15. So it's unclear. But at some point in their childhood, some horseplay by the pool turns into one trying to pull the other. I think Olivia tries to pull Joan into the pool. Sorry, Joan tries to pull Olivia into the pool. Olivia knocks her back and actually breaks Joan Fontaine's collarbone against the edge of the pool. So from a very young age, these two are breaking each other's bones. And then in their subsequent books, still insisting that they were in the right. Well, of course I knocked her back. She was trying to drown me in the pool. Can you believe it? I was just walking by the pool and Olivia broke my collarbone. Their stage mom didn't seem to mind this. She,
sure.
She kind of encouraged these tendencies and was also teaching them to be, despite the fact, they were cosmopolitan international kids. She was making sure they all spoke with kind of perfect mid-Atlantic accents, maybe even tending toward the posh British accents of her and her first husband, even though they had grown up in Tokyo and then in the Bay Area instead of in.
But this is pre-war when mid-Atlantic accents were what people used on the radio.
That's how everybody in America talked if they were sufficiently successful. And in 1934, their success actually finds them. Their mom Lillian is back in Tokyo seeing to make the divorce permanent, which I guess means she can't be a bigamist, but maybe she's been living with this Fontaine guy not in the bonds of holy wedlock. I guess it's just occurring to me now the timeline doesn't quite work out.
But maybe it's just there's something to do with Japanese law around marriage, and
she had to go get a Japanese divorce.
Yeah, which involves what? Cutting off your pinky finger.
Probably. No, this ex's pinky finger for sure.
Cutting off the ex's pinky finger.
So she has taken Joan Fontaine back to Tokyo with her. Olivia de Havilland is still a teen. I think she's like 18 at this point. But she is touring in some kind of company of A Midsummer Night's Dream. She has followed her mom's dreams and has become a theater actress and is having some success. She's very pretty. Both daughters are very pretty, like their mother. And at some point, Jack Warner happens to be in the crowd watching her perform.
Isn't that the way?
Either Helena or Hermia in A Midsummer Night's Dream, and thinks, well, I've got Max Reinhardt coming over from Vienna to do Midsummer Night's Dream, and we have Bette Davis for this part. But look at this fresh young thing. Look at this 17-year-old from, let me look in the program, San Jose. And he decides...
lives right down the block.
Exactly. He decides Bette Davis is out.
Oh!
And Olivia de Havilland makes her screen debut in this kind of all-star mounting of Max Reinhardt's famous Viennese production of Midsummer Night's Dream. I think Mickey Rooney is Puck. And, somebody famous is who's bottom? Like Jimmy Cagney or somebody. It's the studio system. Yeah. So everybody has to be in this movie, whether it's a Western or Shakespeare, in some cases playing against type, because Jack Warner tells you what movies you're going to be in. And Olivia de Havilland immediately suddenly has a 7-year contract with Warner Brothers, and her life has changed forever. And everybody assumes that Joan Fontaine, who has always been the more aristocratic one, the more socially mobile one, the one that liked chatting up boys and going to parties and fancy dress. Everyone assumes she's going to move to New York and become a socialite and will take the world by storm that way. No, Joan gets home from Tokyo in order to find that her sister is a movie star.
Whoa.
And she gets mad.
Yeah.
She very quickly stuns Olivia by signing with MGM.
Whoa.
And suddenly, Joan and Olivia de Havilland are rising Hollywood stars.
And Joan has adopted Fontaine as her surname?
Not yet. Joan
de Havilland?
I think she later says a fortune teller tells her your name should be 8 letters and start with an F. Olivia does not want them to share a last name.
And do you feel like Joan got signed that contract because she was the sister of Olivia, or did she have some acting experience that she would have independently?
I'm sure she would have screen tested.
Yeah.
And she's a pretty young blonde whose sister just got signed by Jack Warner, and I'm sure that doesn't hurt. But she goes to Olivia and says, I want to do I'm not going to be a socialist. I want to do what you have done. And Olivia says, just promise me you won't go as Joan de Havilland. Like, I'm already going to have enough trouble making it in this business. I don't want there to be 2 de Havilland sisters. And Joan agrees to take their stepdad's last name. And honestly, like, what's a better screen name than Joan Fontaine?
Only Olivia de Havilland.
Like, you want a 2-syllable last name where the accent is kind of on the second syllable. Because you get Roderick or Jennings. They sound so pedestrian.
Yeah, they sure do.
But Fontaine.
What if your name was Ken Jennings?
John Roderick. I guess I shouldn't imply that you have a 2-syllable last name. That sets you off.
Yeah, it's 3 syllables.
Roderick.
Roderick.
What if it was on the middle syllable? Roderick.
No? Fully half the people in my family pronounce their last name as Roderick, and I disavow them.
This is like the Colbert split or whatever, right?
But basically, I just invented it. When I say fully half, I mean like 94% say Roderick. But
so 2 winsome young sisters are now rising stars, and as you can imagine, the gossip columnists of the time take note of this. And they could be, obviously it's within their interest to plant seeds of sibling rivalry, because that's a more interesting story than these 2 love each other and have brunch every Sunday and are each other's biggest cheerleaders. But the sisters don't appear to be helping. They already have this childhood of resentment and rivalry. Right. And maybe without that, the tabloids would have had, the columnists would have had nothing to work with. But in this case, it's very easy to get them in print saying awful things about each other. Particularly Joan, who is kind of the cattier of the 2. Olivia's reputation is kind of sweet and retiring, but still, that when it comes to her sister, the gloves are off. Joan does a singing and a dancing picture with Fred Astaire at one point, and Olivia mocks her dancing, says, oh, well, she was always a terrible dancer. I can't believe my flat-footed sister is in a musical before me.
So really undermining, not just gossiping, but really trying to
that's
take them out.
That's kind of a career move there, right? And they fight over men as well. By 1939, I guess Joan Fontaine is at a party with Olivia's ex, Brian Ahern, and Joan's telling a psychic at the party. All her decisions appear to be motivated by psychics.
I didn't realize there were so many psychics in the golden age of Hollywood.
Do you think it's just one guy following her around?
Maybe.
She had an entourage.
Or maybe they're tapping each other out, there's like a guild of them, and they're like, okay, you talk to Joan.
I've got the 8:00 shift. I got to go home to my... So he says that you're going to marry the host of the party, British actor Brian Ahern. Brian Ahern is actually Olivia's ex. And this is what happens. Joan marries some guy that had already dated her sister, which maybe is part of the appeal. Olivia spent a lot of the 30s in a liaison with none other than Howard Hughes.
Heard of him?
You've heard of Howard Hughes, aviator turned movie maker. And I guess one night at the Trocadero, Joan sees them together and immediately decides to throw herself at him. And in fact, after his relationship with Olivia de Havilland ended, he did also propose to Joan Fontaine.
So it seems like Joan is the one that's like really stirring up trouble, and Olivia is trying to...
Maybe it's a bit of a Rorschach test based on your birth order. If you're an older sibling who watched a little a new little baby take everyone's attention, maybe you're like, oh, like that kid is awful. And I guess there are some facts here, like her moving into her sister's field and trying to one up her, that would tend to support that.
Right.
But Olivia also seems to have a real complex about, I'm the older sister.
Yeah.
How dare anything good happen to her? And people are territorial about their fields.
Is there a consensus about the vivacity of the two? Who is the more vivacious?
Oh, is there a vivacity index?
Well, I wonder if at this point in time, vivacity would have been one of the ways that you measured a person's, it's like Riz, who has more Riz.
Olivia is the bigger star.
Right.
But she's, she kind of has like a, as opposed to Riz, she kind of has a sweet ingenue quality. She's often the maiden in an Errol Flynn movie. She actually, she became a big star at Warner Brothers, paired with Errol Flynn in like 8 of his action movies.
Right.
And after Captain Blood and Adventures of Robin Hood, David O. Selznick, who had the rights to Gone with the Wind, the biggest literary sensation of its time, thought that she would be perfect to play kind-hearted Melanie Wilkes, the perfect kind of innocent foil for Scarlett's schemings. And the problem was she was under the 7-year contract at Warner. So Selznick just had to plead with Jack Warner endlessly to get him to release Olivia de Havilland. I think he finally did only after de Havilland actually kind of pigeonholed Jack Warner's wife at a party and said, please tell him to let me out. This would be so good for me. Maybe it'd be good for Warner's too if I make this movie.
Was it good for her to be to not be the lead in Gone with the Wind? Was she not overshadowed by Vivien Leigh?
It was the biggest movie of its time.
Right.
The problem was that she was up for Best Supporting Actress, and she was up against another performer from Gone with the Wind. It was actually Hattie McDaniel, the African-American actress.
Oh, right.
Who had been cast as Mammy. And then kind of had to defend that casting to the NAACP and other, the Black Papers really were like,
this is bad representation.
Yeah, it's a racist caricature of a plantation. Her name is even Mammy, for crying out loud. And McDaniel basically said, like, girls got to eat, there's no good parts, like you gotta cut me some slack here. But it was in a difficult position, and the NAACP wasn't wrong. It's not like Gone with the Wind was on the right side of every racial conversation.
But so the two were in competition for the Best Supporting. And
I don't know the story. I think Hattie McDaniel was maybe not allowed to bring her husband to the ceremony, or they couldn't go in the right entrance or something. It was just some awful story like that, but ended up winning. It's kind of the equivalent of the Academy patting itself on the back in the 60s and making sure Sidney Poitier has an Oscar just to show, let's see how equal we are.
Right.
There's even a black movie actor now. Can you believe it? And Austin, very performatively, and look at him, like one of the good ones,
Right. He's not playing a chauffeur.
Right. But that kind of racism where you can be like, what a outstanding specimen of his race. What a credit to his race he is. You have to be a superhero basically to even compete in Hollywood. Hattie McDaniel wins the Oscar as kind of part of this progressive back patting, and also because it's a great performance. But Olivia de Havilland was not expecting it, and she just runs into the kitchen and just kind of cries next to a vat of soup at this moment that we now think of as kind of a historic moment for civil rights and for African-American performers. Olivia de Havilland is off in the kitchen feeling sorry for herself because she does not have a little statue to cradle. So that's not a story that puts her in the best light.
Well, you can imagine if you were nominated for an Oscar or an Emmy or even a local Phony Award.
And if I lost to Pat Sajak.
Or you lost to me.
You'd
be like, ugh.
I didn't run to the kitchen to complain. And boy, I'll tell you what, if I had lost to some marginalized nominee, boy, would I have been clapping twice as hard.
Absolutely would. You'd have been standing O.
Pat Sajak, not super marginalized.
No, in fact, maybe it's time for Pat Sajak's reign to end.
It did. That's why he won.
That's right.
That's why he won his his post-wheel Emmy.
So
Well
is there a
deserved.
comparison between, are Olivia and Joan the Elizabeth and Margaret? Is Joan Fontaine the Princess Margaret to Olivia de Havilland's Queen Elizabeth?
At first, but here's what happens. Here's the twist that really kind of turns the knife in the rivalry. David O. Selznick, having had such success putting Olivia de Havilland in Gone with the Wind, wants to borrow her again from Warner's. He's got a young, promising director to come over from England and direct his first film. And there's a juicy part for a sweet young actress out of her element, and he wants Olivia de Havilland to play the lead in Rebecca. He's got Alfred Hitchcock coming over on the heels of making these British movies that Hollywood loved, 39 Steps and Lady Vanishes, and he's going to make one of his suspensey, gothic-y things in Hollywood.
I never think of, I don't know if in my whole life I've ever heard of Alfred Hitchcock being described as a young director coming over.
Isn't that funny to imagine? I mean, if you look at him at the time, he does not look young.
Right.
He's a balding, pot-bellied guy with those moon eyes. But he's going to come over and make his first movie. And this time, Selznick cannot get Jack Warner to let Olivia de Havilland out of her contract. He really wants her. And here the stories diverge. Who will play the second Mrs. De Winter in Rebecca? In Olivia's telling, after Jack Warner won't let her out of her deal.
He was only 40, by the way, Alfred Hitchcock, when he made Rebecca.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
And he's got 40 more years in Hollywood, ahead of him. Jack Warner comes to Olivia de Havilland and says, "Would you mind if I take your sister instead?"
Ooh.
And maybe in some versions, she actually suggests it. She wants a little bit of credit for casting Joan Fontaine in Rebecca. Joan's version gives Olivia no credit. In this one, she's at a party at Charlie Chaplin's house. She's seated next to this big fat guy she doesn't even know is David O. Selznick, and she's just telling him about this book she's finished. You will not believe this book. It's called Rebecca. And he says, "Young lady, I'm David O. Selznick, and I just bought the rights this afternoon." And at that point, she starts to charm him, and she gets cast in Rebecca on her own merits. But the fact is, she's a very young actress, and it's a tricky role. She's inexperienced. Laurence Olivier, who she's playing opposite, does not like her. I think Olivia de Havilland said, "Oh no, don't cast me. I'm a brunette. Cast Joan. She's a blonde, and Larry's brunette. This will be perfect." So in her version of it, it's hair color that wins her sister the part.
This is the Hollywood that I wish still existed. We need a blonde. Hey, give me a blonde.
Give me a blonde. So Olivier doesn't like her. Hitchcock, as we know from the Tippi Hedren show, is famously hard on his actors, particularly his young ingenues. And I don't know do you know the movie Rebecca at all?
I've never seen it. No.
It hinges on a second wife coming into a moody, sad household after the first wife has died, and finding herself very much out of her element, and in fact, maybe her very life is in danger as the specter of the old wife kind of looms above her in the household.
It's the David Copperfield story. Not really.
After Claudia Schiffer left him?
Yeah. Ken, we both love Factor meals. We're both on the record saying we've had extremely positive experiences with the quality and delicious taste of their food. And I just want to reiterate to our listeners that Factor is a absolutely marvelous way to have chef-made gourmet meals that are dietitian approved and ready to heat and eat in 2 minutes, so you feel great no matter what life throws at you. Ken, Factor meals arrive fresh and fully prepared with 40 options across 8 dietary preferences on the menu each week. It's easy to pick meals tailored to your goals, whether those are calorie smart, protein plus, or keto. In fact, Factor Keto is based on randomly controlled clinical trials suggesting that you can lose up to 8 pounds in 8 weeks. Factor can help you feel your best all day long with wholesome smoothies, breakfasts, grab-and-go snacks, and more add-ons. Reach your goals this year, Ken, with ingredients you can trust and convenience that can't be beat. Ken, I know you already eat smart with Factor, but for our listeners, let me just say, get started at factormeals.com/factor Factor Podcast and use the code Factor Podcast to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's 50% off. Wow. With the code Factor Podcast at factormeals.com/Factor Podcast. Didn't Olivier famously not get along with anybody, or was he?
There's lots of stories about him.
Yeah.
People on the stage, I think, loved him. I don't think there's a lot of stories about him being a tyrant of the theater.
Right. But not happy to be in movies.
Yeah, but maybe because he was the kind of one of the first writer director auteur types. When he made his Henry V and Hamlet and later in the 40s, and maybe he never had much time for. I think he kind of knew he was Orson Welles like boy genius.
But Rebecca is early on in his pivot to film.
Yeah, I think maybe he's already made that Wuthering Heights with Greer Garson. Is that right?
Right.
Anyway, is that who's in that? Anyway, yes, but America has discovered him. Hollywood loves him. And so it really suits, a young scared actress to be in this role of the scared second wife who's out of her element. Mm-hmm. And it appears that Selznick and Olivier and Hitchcock in particular just kind of use that for all it's worth. And she is just unhappy and terrified on set every day. And I think it's the kind of thing where the behind the scenes story affects the perception of the movie. The movie's great. The movie's a big hit. And the audience really kind of roots for this obviously uncomfortable actress. Boy, I hope she does well here. We've heard in the gossip columns that everybody's out to get her, but look at her.
This is pre-method acting.
Yeah, I guess she's inventing method acting. And so she is nominated the year after Olivia loses the Best Supporting Actress Oscar for Gone with the Wind. She is nominated for Best Actress for Rebecca, and Olivia, I think privately, is losing her shit.
Right.
She's like, what if because everybody's saying this, what if the younger ingenue sister wins first after Olivia's humiliating defeat? And nobody's saying this, but to a novelty performance by a black actress, that would have been very, I think there was a lot of, it's an asterisk because she lost to Hattie McDaniel, unfortunately. As it turns out, let's see who wins that year. I think Joan Fontaine loses in a surprise. She loses to Ginger Rogers playing a rare dramatic part as a kind of a lady of the night or a, ambiguous. You can't have prostitutes in movies back then. So
right.
She's a dancer or something in Kitty Foyle.
Asterix.
Another asterisk. Mm-hmm. So now the de Havilland sisters are collectively 0-0 at the Oscars, or 1-1, I guess.
Except
nobody's won yet.
The younger was nominated for Best Actress, the bigger deal.
Right. And that definitely, I think that definitely colors Olivia de Havilland. And the following year, It Is War. Joan Fontaine, after having been such a success with Rebecca, is cast by Hitchcock and Selznick in their next collaboration, which is a very similar movie about a young bride who's worried that danger is going to come to her, except in this case, the husband is Cary Grant and he really is trying to kill her. Spoilers. Mm-hmm. So basically she's playing a retread of her Rebecca role. And
she agreed to the film in spite of having had such a miserable time prior, because that's what you do in your career.
I guess.
Yeah.
Plus it worked out. It turned out that all the rough treatments she got from her colleagues did elicit a great performance. And presumably she thinks this time she'll have more stature and more respect. And that's probably true. And sure enough, she is nominated for her performance as the lead in Suspicion, even though it's not as strong a movie as Rebecca is. Olivia de Havilland's marriage to Brian Aherne is breaking down, so she has not actually, I think it's been a minute since she'd appeared in a good movie, but she finally gets a part that she likes. Billy Wilder, the future Billy Wilder and Charles Brackett, who will go on to write Sunset Boulevard, and then Billy Wilder writes Some Like It Hot in The Apartment. The great comedy drama writer, director of his day. I don't think he's directed his first film yet. I don't think he's directed. What is his first movie? Anyway, Double Indemnity is still in the future, but he's already written the very funny script for Greta Garbo and Ninotchka, and they have a script called Hold Back the Dawn about it's kind of a crypto quasi World War II thing about European emigres at the Mexican border trying to get into the country and a romance that develops.
But is this pre-World War II?
Yeah, it's brewing. This is 1940. So if you watch a lot of Hollywood movies at the time, a lot of them are about the nameless troubles in Europe or the menace in Europe. If you watch Hitchcock's Foreign Correspondent or Casablanca, even a lot of movies I guess Casablanca is a little more specific. But yeah, for a couple years before Pearl Harbor, a lot of the movies are like, boy, things sure are turbulent in unnamed countries of Europe. And Olivia de Havilland gives a great comic romantic performance in Hold Back the Dawn, and she also gets nominated for Best Picture. For Best Actress.
So now they're in direct competition for Best Actress.
Head to head. This is what every gossip columnist's dream.
Wow, it's my dream.
And we we already know.
So did Joan get along with Cary Grant? Is it a more supportive? I mean, he seems like a nice man.
Yes, I don't think she has the backstage problems on Suspicion that she had on Rebecca. But their relationship in real life, despite the fact that they're still seeing each other socially, things are strained. Olivia de Havilland tells gossip columnist Sidney Skolsky about a dream she's having where she's on a beach with Joan and she sees the tide coming in and it's about to go over their heads and she's trying to decide if she should save Joan or herself. And Sidney, I always wake up before I have to make the decision. So apparently not only is her, psyche really messed up as regards her sister, she's just fine telling the Hearst gossip columnists all about it. She is okay with that being the headline, that there's tension between them.
I wonder how many of the voters in the Academy of Film did this on purpose, recognized that that this was just the best thing that could happen to Hollywood, to pit these two sisters who clearly don't like each other for the highest award in film.
I was looking at the performances that year, and it doesn't appear that they aced out undeserving folks. Like, it's a strong year. Betty Davis is in The Little Foxes. Barbara Stanwyck made Ball of Fire, which is it's another Billy Wilder, Charles Brackett script, I think. Greer Garson has just become a big star. She's in a biopic called Blossoms of the Dust. There's not a lot of other great performances that are not nominated. I think de Havilland and Fontaine are clearly at the top of the field. Fontaine coming off you should have won year,
right? And
the same with de Havilland, having been in the biggest movie of all time and not having an Oscar to show for it.
Right.
But they're even though they're socializing in the same circles and dating the same men, they're still clearly competitive. In July of 1941, Joan Fontaine, I think, throws a birthday dinner for Olivia, and she shows up 2 hours late and the food is cold. And Joan is just like, Olivia, how could you? I threw you a party. And she said, it's my birthday. I'll come as late as I want.
Yeah.
So
can you imagine being at these parties? Like if you're David Niven and you're like, oh, these two.
Well, that's what I guess Niven's not in Hollywood yet, but yes.
What? Niven was making films before the war?
British films only, right?
British films.
Maybe?
Huh. British films. Asterisks.
Exactly. They're competing over roles, so it's a career thing too. I think Olivia de Havilland wanted a movie called The Constant Nymph, but Warner's gave it to her sister instead. Olivia's burned out. She's been making, as part of her contract, she can't really turn down films. She's been making 5 movies a year, and after she finishes Hold Back the Dream, she gets told, nope, you're making some piece of crap called Saratoga Trunk, and she says to Jack Warner,
Saratoga Trunk.
Your mom's a Saratoga Trunk. She says to Jack Warner, look, I've made 5 movies this year. You got to let me have a month off. I'm at the end of my rope. And in fact, she is disciplined. She is given a 4-month suspension without pay for daring to speak up to the studio bosses. So in February 1942, when the nominees come out, they both give nice quotes to the Willa Parsons about how much they loved each other's performance. But when they're asked, is it true that there's a feud between you? They both say things like, well, all sisters fight.
Yeah, sure.
So they're not really... They're not really hiding it. Joan tells her people that she tells her studio that she's not going to come to the ceremony. She's got an 8 a.m. call the next day. she's going to skip the banquet. At the time, it was a big dinner. It was not yet the thing it had become, but it was a big dinner. Like it's a big room. And Olivia is like, oh, no, you don't.
Okay.
Like, we're both going to be there. And so she swans into Joan Fontaine's dressing room and Joan says, I have nothing to wear. So in swans Olivia with, like in a movie with a man holding a stack of hat boxes to the door jamb with 6 different outfits for her to try on. You are coming to this banquet.
Right. And she knows her sister's size.
Apparently, yes. They wind up at the same table. They wind up at Selznick's table. And basically every eye is on them. 1,600 people the whole time are just laser focused on that table for any sign of chilliness or a fork through the back of a hand.
Somebody throwing their drink on someone else.
I mean, we've lived through some crazy Oscars. We never thought we would see the wrong movie announced as Best Picture only to get unannounced 90 seconds later. We never thought we would see the presumptive Best Actor winner slap the MC.
Right.
I mean, the Oscars have been crazy lately.
Cray-cray, I think, is what we call them.
But this is the beginning of that. Everybody just watching to see what kind of outburst is going to happen from these two. And the Academy appears to know this. They've decided to give Best Actress last.
Oh, wow.
Which normally you would build up to say Best Picture.
Yeah.
But no, like they know the main event is de Havilland v. Fontaine. The press has called it the Battle of the Sisters and has really been hyping up this angle. And you kind of have to feel bad for the sisters because that can't be helping. You know, like this whole industry and by extension, its 100 million readers essentially rooting against your relationship.
Right. And this is before it was on television. There wasn't television yet.
Right. There was radio, I guess, but probably not live. Maybe it was a live broadcast. Bob Hope is hosting this year.
Of course. Good man.
Fontaine is so sure that she would lose, she has bet $10 to none other than Wendell Willkie. I bet you didn't think there's going to be a Wendell Willkie cameo. Willkie has recently stood up for the industry in front of Congress. After losing his presidential bid, he continues as a Republican in the Senate. He becomes an advocate. Is he Californian? Maybe. Oh, no, he's not. He's a Midwesterner, but also not in the Senate. He, after his loss to FDR, he
was an administrator before, right? Some kind of like government functionary.
Yeah, and but he became kind of you'll be shocked to hear, a lobbyist after a Republican presidential loss.
Yeah.
And he was kind of an advocate for Hollywood in front of Congress. And so he came out on stage to thunderous applause because he had just won some kind of government, regulatory protections for the studios or something. So there were a lot of Wendell Willkie jokes that night. And he put up $25 to Joan Fontaine's 10 that she would not win because he was, I guess, flirting and was sure that she would win.
He bet her that she would win.
Yes. She's betting that she would not win. Ginger Rogers is giving out the award as the previous year's winner, and she is hoping against hope that neither will win because she doesn't want to see what happens.
A fist fight.
And so she opens the envelope upside down, is a bit befuddled, and she turns it around, and you can see her kind of jolt, and she says, Joan Fontaine for suspicion.
Whoa. So
the younger sister wins first. Olivia's...
And what happens at the table? Are there accounts?
Apparently Joan Fontaine just freezes because she's like, what have I done? In her telling of it, like, Olivia can't handle that she was born first, that she got married first, that she had a kid first. Now she's won an Oscar first. She knows it's her sister's worst nightmare. And Olivia just hisses at her, get up there. And so she goes up and gives a speech. And I guess when she comes back, Olivia very nicely holds her hand. But even in writing about that, Hedda Hopper says, an icy chill was apparent beneath the or maybe it's the other way. Maybe Joan pats her sister's hand on the way back to the table. But either way, Hedda Hopper can see through this empty theatrical gesture. Who do they think they're fooling, these two?
I mean, you have to, at some level, no matter how broken you are inside, be excited for your sibling that's won the Academy Award.
I don't know if you do if you're these two.
Maybe not.
Everybody has, today we call it main character syndrome.
Right.
And everybody has it to some degree. Even if you say you're empathic, on some level, your brain is wired to think, my needs come first and I need to try I need to try to overcome that if that's something I care about overcoming.
Not me. I don't have main character syndrome.
Is that right?
Yeah.
What do you have?
Nobody that is making up things like that. None of that applies to me. Main character syndrome is something that other lesser people have.
You're saying is you're the one person in the world that doesn't have main character
That's right.
syndrome.
That's right.
In a lot of ways, it's about you as the person who doesn't have main character syndrome.
Well, no. I mean, I think that all this that we're talking about is happening at some level, but I'm not thinking about it. I have too much other stuff to think about.
Olivia, on some level, may know that it's a good look to say that it's happy that it stayed in the family.
Of course she does.
But really, this is something that is being done to her. Once again, she's arguably the biggest movie star in America. I guess Bette Davis is a bigger star, but she's one of the biggest actresses in America, and she's been snubbed twice for the big award.
And you, as a film buff, do you have a preference in the two performances?
I mean, the thing about Fontaine winning for Suspicion is it's kind of one of these makeup awards.
Oh, for having failed to win the year prior,
when she should have maybe won for Rebecca, and everyone's like, "Really, Ginger Rogers? What were we thinking?"
Right.
Right. And this happens again and again. Pacino wins for Scent of a Woman because how did he not win for Serpico or The Godfather?
Was Suspicion the better film?
Suspicion. See, neither of these movies are like Rebecca level classics. Suspicion has some memorable Hitchcock moments. There's a pretty famous scene where Cary Grant's bringing her the poisoned glass of milk. It's kind of a gaslight scenario. And Hitchcock puts a bulb inside the milk so it glows from within in a way that nobody had seen in a movie before. That's pretty good. But Hold Back the Dawn is, it's not as good as Billy Wilder's other early scripts. It's fine. It's charming. Like they both kind of, really, if you were voting today, you might say, yeah, it's Bette Davis for Little Foxes in a runaway.
Right.
And I think Bette Davis was on the record as saying the year she won, she was like, I should not have won. I won in a makeup and I robbed Katharine Hepburn, who clearly had the better performance. That means some year they're going to have to give it to Kate and rob somebody else. Like Bette Davis was kind of an early head of the Academy, and she was well aware that these kind of sympathy makeup votes always led to dominoes and got you in trouble.
When did Katharine Hepburn finally win her Oscar?
Luckily, she won not that far. She won in the late 30s for Morning Glory, so she didn't have to wait that long.
Who did she bounce?
That's a good question. You got to look at because I don't know if anybody thinks Morning Glory is some deathless performance.
This is a wonderful game that maybe continues to this day.
You can make a family tree of
who won, who didn't deserve it.
And then you'll get to the ultimate victim who never gets a chance to win because streaming collapses the movies.
They never get an EGOT.
Or LA becomes a crater or something. Kim Il-sung finally gets the range to nuke LA, or probably not Kim Il-sung. That would be crazy. Probably Kim Jong-un.
Yeah, right. Kim Il-sung would have a harder
ghost.
time. Yeah.
The reanimated Kim Il-sung. In 1944, Olivia de Havilland does probably the bravest thing she's ever done in her life, and kind of is going to become the good guy in the story if she wasn't already. She once again gets told to go to work for a movie she doesn't want to make, and she is once again exhausted making mediocre movies, and she says no and walks out.
Oh.
And Warner takes her to court, and a California judge finds that the studio contract she signed was
usurious.
Whatever the legal term is for a illegal contract that did not have any kind of meeting of the minds and should be unenforceable. And
so does Olivia Havilland break the studio system?
She kind of does.
Whoa!
For years thereafter, well, it's a drop in the bucket. The decision rules that any movie contract over 7 years is unreasonable.
Oh.
So you can still sign a 7-year deal and they can still make you do whatever.
Right.
But that's the first time that anybody has found against one of the studios in court. It took as we noticed in the EGOT show, it took forever for the actors to even unionize. So every case was a test case.
Was she blacklisted?
No, she was too big a star. She continued to make... this is in 44. She still doesn't have an Oscar. In 46, her marriage ends to author Marcus Goodrich. When asked about her sister's upcoming nuptials, Joan Fontaine says, all I know about Marcus is that he's been married. He's had 4 wives and written 1 book. It would be nicer if it were the other way around.
Oh,
brutal.
Smoking.
And this is not one of just the funny stories. Like de Havilland reads that and just thinks that's unforgivable.
Right. Pretty mean.
Yeah. And in 1947...
Well, now, wait a minute. You have written more than 4 books and only been married once.
That's
so
true.
You really are
I'm Joan Fontaine's dream man.
Yeah. You're an example of like the antidote to this smoke and burn.
I'm born 100 years too late, but boy, it sounds like Joan Fontaine would have been into me.
Yeah.
In 1947, Olivia de Havilland has a great part, really the lead role in another romantic drama directed by her Hold Back the Dawn director, Mitchell Eisen, and written by Charles Brackett. It's a romantic drama about kind of a slightly taboo topic. She has a baby out of wedlock.
Ooh.
And it's a pretty good movie, and she finally wins her Academy Award. Joan Fontaine is at the ceremony giving out the Best Actor Award. Mm-hmm. So she's there on the scene, and her publicist asks Olivia, "What are you going to do if Joan comes over or tries to talk to you?" And she just basically says, "I won't acknowledge her. Like I'm going to have nothing to do with her."
Whoa.
She wins a second Oscar a couple years later, I think, for The Snake Pit, like another kind of social thing where she plays a inmate in a mental institution, kind of a pulling back the curtain on the right on
prior
the
to
scandalous, kind of a cuckoo's nest kind of a thing, yeah. And wins a second Oscar for that. Divorces Marcus Goodrich, and she still keeps up, the equivalent of diplomatic relations with her sister, but she's already she's relocated to Paris and is working less. She kind of makes more occasional and more quixotic movie choices from this point on. But every time she sees her sister, there are still squabbles. Joan's daughter, Deborah, remembers them sitting for a portrait and just fighting for a photo and just fighting the whole time about who would sit where and whose hands should be how, and, who the photographer is and, all the rest. Like you just couldn't get them. You couldn't get them in the same room. But they kind of keep up this, despite having the most famous feud in Hollywood history, arguably, maybe aside from Bette Davis and Joan Crawford. They kind of keep up this chilly cordiality until 1975.
Whoa.
Joan Fontaine is, I guess, then she would just be in her, she was in her 50s, late 50s. She's on the road doing Cactus Flower. And so she's somewhere, some regional theater in, Modesto or someplace. Sorry, Davis, in your joke. We'll say she's in Davis.
Okay, Davis.
And she gets the word that her 88-year-old mom, Lillian, has died. And she can't get out of her tour. And by the time... So she hears Olivia swooping in from Paris to manage all this. She hears, maybe it's not cancer. We're going to do some... apparently Olivia had already come there when nobody had told her. Olivia had already been, trying to see to the treatment. Maybe it's not cancer. We'll try something else. And then when her mom dies, I think she cremates her mom
before Joan has
in Joan's absence and tries to hold the funeral without her.
Oh.
And Joan has to put her foot down and say, absolutely not. I can get off this Sunday. Just delay it 2 days. Olivia doesn't want to, but in the end, they both attend the funeral, and that's ball game for Joan Fontaine.
Olivia plays the dutiful daughter, and does the press give her that credit?
Yes. But it seems like she doesn't come off well in this story.
In the end.
Yeah, trying to hold the funeral in her sister's absence. And, the thing about life, the terrible thing about life is everyone has their reasons, and I'm sure she would say, hey, I had to do all the emotional labor. I'm the one who flew in from Paris.
Right.
If you can't get out of freaking Cactus Flower in regional theater, fine, but you're gonna miss the funeral.
That's gonna be something that I say to you. Listen, if you can't get out of Cactus Flower in some regional theater, fine.
And from then on, for decades, if they were always asked, they would quite honestly say, no, I don't like her and I don't see her. Wow. At one point, Joan Fontaine tells People magazine, you can divorce your sister just like you can divorce your husband.
Whoa.
They see it as a permanent, acrimonious split.
Now, is there, I know that you mentioned earlier Warren Beatty and Shirley MacLaine, and they both won Oscars. But other than them, are there any other siblings? I mean, it feels like siblings winning Oscars has got to be like an EGOT, one of the narrowest. I'm
sure there will be cases where people win them for different craft awards, but actual performers, because the famous ones are all like, various generations of Houstons. Walter Houston won for acting, and then John Huston John Huston won for directing, and then Angelica for acting again. I think there are multiple generations of Coppolas, because didn't Carmine win for composing?
Oh, yeah.
Let's see. I'm looking for siblings here. John Voight and Angelina Jolie, those are parents.
So it's vanishingly rare.
Yeah, obviously Henry Fonda for On Golden Pond, and then Jane Fonda for Clue. That's a case where the daughter wins before the father. But again,
that sounds biblical.
It's not. They're not siblings.
The daughter goeth before the father in Oscars.
I don't see other performer pairs here. Let me look. Oh, here we go. I was in the wrong section. Lionel and Ethel Barrymore both won. Everything else is for
best packaging.
Is for behind the scenes work. A lot of composers and writers, and Sonic's most recent siblings to win happened in the same envelope. Billie Eilish and Phineas.
Oh, right, of course.
For the No Time
One
to
for
Die
the same
song.
thing.
Yes, exactly. Collaborating. But yeah, you're right. The Barrymores, Joan and Olivia, and then Warren and Shirley are the only acting siblings to win Oscars. What is that in a BGOT or siblings, a CGOT? I
wonder if having your sibling also win an Oscar actually tarnishes your Oscar.
Well, it sure did for Olivia de Havilland. I don't know. Maybe once she won. I'm sure winning 2.
Yeah.
While Joan Fontaine, did not really have high-profile parts anymore. That must have helped.
Yeah, if you feel like, oh, well, maybe yours was just a fluke, but I won 2.
Joan would kind of muse to interviewers that, as angry as she was when despite being a year younger, because that really seems to be the root of their thing, is an older sister, younger sister dynamic. Despite the fact that I was younger, I won the Oscar first and got married first and all the rest. Can you imagine how furious she'll be if I die first? The fact is they both lived well into the 2010s. Huh. Joan Fontaine did not die until she was 96 years old in 2013. And then, largely out of spite, Olivia de Havilland lived to be 104.
You think that the last 7 years of her life were just lived in spite?
Yes. She was doctors could tell that she was being kept alive by a desire to live in a world without Joan Fontaine in it.
104.
She died in 2020. She lived to see a COVID mask, despite having been born in 1916.
Did she die of COVID?
She did not.
Oh.
Although,
how do we know?
Because when you're 104, you can just die of being 104.
Yeah, I suppose.
I mean, it's probably the one thing she was being tested for, every week. They probably know absolutely whether she ever got COVID or not.
Being 104 is fatal.
Yes, almost no one survives being 104.
Yeah.
And of those who do, they almost all die of being 105. So, which is kind of a special extreme stage 4 case of being 104.
Yeah, right.
So that ends the story. There's a very sad quote, and this seems a little performative. There's a very sad quote from Joan Fontaine where she says, what if instead of being enemies, what if we had, because I think she was often the one who was like, even though in their younger life, she was the cattier one, at least in the press.
She became the
voice of reconciliation. Why won't my big star sister be nice to me? And she said, what if we had worked together? We think of all the clout we would have had.
Why did nobody ever cast them together?
We could have got the directors and the writers we wanted. We could have had our pick of screenplays and studios. We basically could have written our own ticket.
They probably couldn't get insurance.
Well, I mean, Betty Davis and Joan Crawford famously did get to play against each other and got to, as enemies who hated each other, as feuding sisters in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. And I wonder if anybody tried to cast, I guess, would Olivia and Joan would have been the right age for that. I wonder if they thought of them for that. Maybe a little too demure in both cases.
I mean, the bigger question is, who are the siblings where one did win an Oscar and the other didn't, who were both actresses?
Oh, but also is a big star, like
Yeah.
who could have won.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, right.
I mean, I think we all know that, like, even though Alec Baldwin was nominated, nobody's expecting Stephen or Billy, right?
Right. You never know. He might play against type. He might be in the remake of Gone with the Wind. And that concludes the Battle of the Sisters. Entry 104.GE3008. Certificate number 30747 in the omnibus. Futureling's social media died an inglorious death. But if it still exists in your area and era, I mean, it is possible to exist in your area.
Is there geographic social media? I guess next door.
I'm sure there will be eventually, right?
I mean, we're about to be we could be in a TikTok-free country soon. I don't know.
Well, yeah, didn't TikTok just recently sue the federal government to say, no, we are not a Chinese spy organization. We are your friends.
I mean, if you have to say, we promise we're not a Chinese spy organization, maybe you're already in trouble.
Well,
I had somebody at a Thanksgiving dinner, this Australian artist was there, and he was telling us this nightmare scenario he thinks about all the time where the year is 2060 and a U.S. president gets elected, and the Chinese know everywhere his eyeball looked on every screen of his device, how long he stayed on every video for the first decades of his life, and what kind of havoc you could wreak with that.
yeah, exactly.
And I'm like, that's going to happen in the 2020s. We don't have to wait for, Putin's already got a P tape. We don't care about some hypothetical Chinese TikTok data.
Well, apparently the other day, my Instagram account ports both over to Facebook and to Threads because they're all owned by Zuckerberg.
Does that mean everything you post on Insta appears in both places?
Yeah, unless unless my post on Instagram is too long, Threads still has a word count.
Does it AI reduce it?
No, it just won't post it to
I
Threads,
see.
but it'll port anything over to Facebook. Anyway, I lost control of my Facebook account because of two-factor authentication.
Yes.
It kept saying that it was sending a code to my iPhone 12. It's just a great program. But apparently I posted a picture of a torchiere, one of those lamps that used to stand in the corner of everybody's house
like
that points at the ceiling.
That very 90s lamp.
Yeah, the tipping over lamp that killed moths.
Yes.
And I have no idea what's happening to that post on Facebook, but on Threads, like the notification, I have all notifications turned off, but I ventured over there, and apparently it has just blown up on Threads.
You're a Thread star.
Yeah, like thousands and thousands of people have faved it. It's been commented on multiple times, and I had no idea because, I don't visit Threads that often. So I'm apparently Mr. Torchiere, and no one over on Threads has commented, hey, wait a minute, isn't this guy Bean Dad? There's just a bunch of millennials like, I had that lamp.
You're Torchiere Dad now.
I'm Torchiere Dad.
I didn't know the word Torchiere until right now.
Yeah.
Like, I would have said that a Torchiere was, he worked for the Spanish Inquisition,
Right.
or was somebody kind of
in the Olympics.
Mardi Gras parade.
Yeah, no, it's the name of that crazy
Style of lamp.
Which
Is it any lamp that opens like that, or did some company make the Torchiere?
there is kind of the definitive one, although there were a lot of copycats. But the number of comments, I did go to the Threads and read the comments, and it was first all the people saying I had that lamp, then all the people saying that remember the smell of that lamp after it killed a moth and the moth caught on fire. And then there were a bunch of comments like, I can't believe that everyone had this lamp and that somehow this is a generation defining lamp.
Just looking at the picture of it, I could smell the carpet and see the cinder block walls and the CD racks.
The CD rack was a big part of the the reminiscence. I think anyone born between 1980 and 2000 had that lamp, knows that lamp.
So we need to stop saying, because social media is dead, we need to start saying, find me on Threads.
Find me on Threads and fave my Torchier post so that I can become a legendary figure. And in China, they'll shout my name. My name will be on big banners. You can, if you're not going to do that, you can find at Omnibus Project everywhere at Omnibus Project is sold. You can find at Ken Jennings and at John Roderick various places. If you go to my Facebook page, I have no idea. If you can comment all over stuff, I won't even know what it is. You can email us at theomnibusproject@gmail.com. You can send us actual mail to P.O. Box 55744, Shoreline, Washington, 98155 or 98133 or 98166.
Possible. We don't know about 98166.
What about 98144? Did we decide?
That's the one that somebody tried just because it's the average of the two that work.
And it goes,
It did eventually get here. It was like a week delay. For example, I just checked the mail yesterday and Jenny sent you a postcard.
Oh, hi, Jenny.
From Nut Tree.
Nut Tree, California. My dad and I used to go there.
You told me on Instagram that you stopped at the Nut Tree airport with your dad. Your story checks out.
There it is.
I'm the girl who read and loved your grandmother's World War I memoir.
Yes, A Nightingale in the Trenches.
I didn't know your grandmother had a World War I memoir, or
well,
did I?
I have one right around here.
Is it sitting here? Well, if you only knew what color it was, we could find it.
Yeah, my grandmother was a opera star of her time and went to France and sang
I gotta say,
opera for the troops.
Nightingale in the Trenches makes it sound like she's a nurse, like a Florence Nightingale.
Right.
I think she knows what she's doing. It's a little stolen valor.
She's a singer, which is also a term you would use.
In the trenches, she knows what she's doing.
Nightingale.
Come on.
Her mother won an award at the Chicago World's Fair.
Wow. What, best ham or something?
No, singing.
Biggest pumpkin?
A singing award. Although I don't know where that award is. It's not here on my trophy case. Oh, there's a picture of my grandmother right there. See her?
Oh, there we go.
Oh,
yeah. you have one of her upstairs, too.
Yeah, Mary Louise Roderick there. And that's like a brochure that offers her services as a trench opera singer.
A trench singer?
And she met
Would you have to dig your own trench before you invited her?
You're digging a trench right now. She met my grandfather there in France.
In a trench?
Well, presumably outside of a trench, because this was the great thing about World War I, you could sing in the trenches and then take a staff car to Paris.
Exactly.
And hang out all night with the officers. So I think that's where they met.
That was the great thing about World War I.
That, of all the things.
There were a lot of bad things about it, but at least there was a car to Paris for the Nightingales.
Yeah, the bad things have been well recorded, but I don't think the fun that the officer class had with the various...
With can-can dancers?
Big hat-wearing... singers.
Jenny says her aunt is currently reading your grandmother's memoir.
What she's very graciously doing is not describing the memoir, which everyone in my family considers unreadably bad.
Was it actually printed by a publisher?
Well,
Ish?
It depends on what you mean by publisher. There are a lot of, well, by a lot, I don't mean a lot. There are only probably 15 extant copies here in the family. And my Uncle Junius, who is not really related to her at all, his father was her brother, so I guess related. But for some reason, Junius feels like he's the one that should be guarding the few remaining of these books.
Okay.
And I said to him at one point,
don't you want to have as few as possible?
Well, I said, you're not a descendant of her. Why do you have the books? And he was like, well, what if my nephew wants one? And I'm like, he doesn't. Anyway.
Well, you would want them out in the wild being read.
Yeah.
You don't want a shelf full of them.
No, I want them here to use as Patreon gifts for people at the $300 level.
Jenny sent you a nut tree. The postcard is of the Nut Tree Airport.
Oh, isn't that wonderful?
In which there appears to be a nut tree that dwarfs all the planes.
I think that may be a little bit of forced perspective, although I don't know. I don't remember that.
It's like at the end of Casablanca where they have all the little people on the runway to make the planes look bigger.
Is that right?
It's got a little toy train. Does the Nut Tree Airport have a toy train?
It does, and in fact, that was a big part of its appeal to me. I love little trains that go around like fairgrounds.
The Nut Tree restaurant began to serve the Highway Traveler in 1921, and today serves the Air Traveler as well.
The Air Traveler as well.
Do we think the Nut Tree restaurant is still open?
Almost certainly. Well, maybe it closed during COVID like everything else.
I hope it's back.
The last thing I would suggest, as I recommended, I do have a couple of copies of Nightingale in the Trenches, and if you subscribe at the $500 level, I will send you an autographed copy. But the rest of
Is it autographed by you?
Well, I wonder.
It's a little too late for her to autograph
I might
them.
have a couple that are autographed by her, but they're almost certainly autographed to some cousin of mine, some son or daughter of Junius. And it's like, Dear Jim, from your great aunt Marguerite. No, Mary Louise. Anyway, you should go to patreon.com/omnibusproject and give $5 at the very least if you love the show and want to continue to hear it in your ears.
Listeners, from our vantage point in your distant past, we have no idea how long our civilization survived. We hope and pray that the catastrophe we fear may never come. If the worst comes soon, though, we're ready for that too. This recording, like all our recordings, may be our final word. But if Providence allows, I'm just glad the porn show wasn't the final word, right?
Well, I don't know. What if there was? What if no one's hearing this? What if we're just pre-catastrophe?
If you're hearing this, at least the porn show wasn't our final word.
Right.
But if Providence allows, we hope to be back with you soon for another entry in the Omnibus.